The screen of my phone lit up with two words, my wife. Below it, in smaller text, incoming call. The monotonous ringtone echoed in the receiver, each pulse landing in the hollow space that had opened up in my chest. Today was my 5th wedding anniversary with Chloe. 5 years. Not a lifetime, but certainly not nothing. Long enough for the intoxicating rush of new love to simmer down into the lukewarm water of daily life. On the coffee table, the gift I'd carefully prepared sat in its box, the ribbon tied with meticulous precision. Inside was the limited edition watch she'd been talking about for months. Next to it, a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket, beads of condensation sliding slowly down the glass like silent tears. The ingredients for a candlelit dinner were arranged perfectly in the fridge, waiting for the lady of the house to come home. But she wasn't coming home. On the phone that afternoon, her voice was laced with a professional, almost rehearsed apology, the muffled announcements of an airport terminal in the background. Honey, I'm so sorry. There's an emergency with the Phoenix project. The client is being impossible and demanding I fly out to oversee things for a few days. The anniversary. We'll have to celebrate when I get back, okay? She spoke quickly, as if she were in a rush. A few days, I asked, gripping the phone. The stew I had simmering on the stove bubbled away, its rich aroma filling the kitchen, but doing nothing to warm the cold knot in my stomach. I'm not sure. Maybe 3 or 4. I'll try to be quick. Her voice seemed to drift for a moment. Okay, be safe. I hung up and stared out the window as dusk began to settle over Denver. An anniversary and a business trip. The combination was a splinter under my skin. Not fatal, but irritating as hell. Since her promotion, the trips had become more frequent, the reasons more urgent. I told myself to be understanding, to be supportive. But understanding and support couldn't fill the sudden, cavernous emptiness of our apartment. The wall clock ticked on, the hands moving deliberately toward 9 o'clock. The chill from the champagne bucket seemed to seep into the air. I picked up my phone, then put it down. Finally, I couldn't resist. I dialed her number. It rang several times before she picked up. Hello, Ethan. Chloe's voice came through, strangely tight, as if she were being strangled. Her breathing was heavy, and the background was utterly silent. So quiet I could hear the faint hiss of static on the line. Chloe, my heart skipped a beat. Are you at the hotel? Why is it so quiet? Oh, yeah, just got to my room. Just got out of the shower. I'm exhausted. Her words tumbled out, fast and rushed, as if she were trying to cover something up. The reception is terrible in this place. Well, if you're tired, you should get some rest, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Is the project going okay? It's fine. Same old stuff, just a ton of crap to deal with. Before she could finish her sentence, a sound cut through the silence. A short, muffled cough from a man. Ahem. The sound was faint, as if someone had immediately covered their mouth. But in the dead quiet, it was as clear as if it had exploded right next to my ear. The blood in my veins turned to ice. My fingers clenched the phone, my knuckles turning white. What was that noise? My voice was low, and I could hear the hard, cold edge in it myself. Noise? What noise? Chloe's voice shot up, laced with a theatrical confusion. There was nothing. You must have misheard me, honey. Maybe it was the TV. I think I have the TV on. She was rambling, but the background was still perfectly silent. There was no TV. The TV, I repeated, each word feeling like it was pulled from a freezer. It's so quiet over there I could hear a pin drop. Oh, well, maybe it was the next room. The walls are paper thin here, she said, her voice trembling, no longer able to hide her panic. Ethan, I have a killer headache. I think I'm just wiped from the trip. I'm going to bed. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Chloe, I started to say, I'm so tired. Bye, honey, love you. She practically spat the words out before hanging up with a sharp click. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, mocking my stupidity. The only sounds in the living room were the ticking of the clock and my own ragged breathing. The fantasy of a candlelit dinner lay shattered on the coffee table. The expensive watch in its box seemed to glint with a cold light. A drop of water from the ice bucket hit the polished hardwood floor with a soft tap that sounded deafeningly loud. The room next door, the TV, a headache? Every excuse was as flimsy as tissue paper torn apart by that single, clear cough from another man. A cold, metallic wave of suspicion, venomous as a snake, coiled around my heart and squeezed. The fortress of trust one had built over 5 years of marriage had just been fractured by a single sound, the cracks spreading like a spiderweb. I sat on the sofa, motionless as a statue carved from ice. Outside, the city lights of Denver sparkled, but their glow couldn't penetrate the abyss my heart had just plunged into. That cough and Chloe's panic were two dull knives methodically sawing at my nerves. The anniversary champagne was now completely, irrevocably cold. Chloe's phone went silent. The next day, I tried calling several times. Either it went to voicemail, or she'd pick up and quickly hang up, always with the same excuses. In a meeting with a client, bad service. Her texts were short and dismissive, radiating a deliberate distance. That cough and her frantic lies were no longer a vague suspicion. They were a poison-tipped dagger lodged in my heart, tormenting me day and night. I couldn't wait any longer. Doubt would drive me insane. I needed the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My finger stopped on a name, Rick. Rick was a private investigator I'd met years ago in a gray market, off-the-book situation. He was the kind of guy who specialized in complex problems on the edge of the law. I'd kept his number like a dark ace up my sleeve, never imagining I'd actually have to play it. He answered on the second ring. The background was noisy, like a greasy spoon diner at lunchtime. Yeah. A low, gravelly voice, raspy from years of smoking, answered without emotion. Rick? It's Ethan Vance. There was a 2-second pause as he placed the name. Mr. Vance. Long time. What's the trouble? He was all business, no small talk. I have a problem. I need you to find someone for me. My wife, Chloe Morgan. The name tasted like bile on my tongue. Oh. Rick's voice registered no surprise, only a professional understanding. Location, timeline, what do you need? She's in Phoenix right now. I don't know the specific hotel, but it should be near the tech corridor. She got there yesterday afternoon, supposed to be there for 3 or 4 days. I need to know everything she's doing, who she's seeing, especially if it's a man. The more detail, the better. And I need it fast. I try to keep my voice steady, but the slight tremor at the end gave me away. Itinerary, contacts, male subjects of interest. Got it. Rick's tone was flat, as if he were confirming a grocery list. Same rates as before. Daily fee plus travel and expenses. 30% up front. I'll text you the account info. Done. I didn't hesitate. At this point, money was the least of my concerns. I need a recent photo, driver's license, cell number, license plate. And what's her official reason for the trip? He asked. I quickly sent him Chloe's information. Official reason is an emergency project meeting with a client in the Phoenix Tech corridor. On it. Wait for my report, Rick said and hung up without another word. The moment the wire transfer went through, I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, weary breath. It felt like I had just mortgaged a piece of my soul to start a war whose outcome I couldn't predict. The sun was shining outside, but I felt no warmth, only a bone-deep chill and a sick, twisted anticipation for the truth I was about to uncover. The wait was agonizing. I tried to answer work emails, but the words on the screen blurred together. Every corner of our apartment held a memory of Chloe, each one now a silent mockery. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was an encrypted email from Rick. The subject line was just one cold word, update. I opened it. There was no text, only an attachment. Several high-resolution photos popped onto my screen like poison-tipped icicles driving straight into my eyes. The first photo, the glittering entrance of a 5-star hotel in Phoenix, the Azure Summit. Chloe, dressed in a stylish beige trench coat, was talking to a man. He was in his 40s, fit, wearing a tailored cashmere coat that screamed money. A ridiculously expensive watch peeked out from under his cuff. He was leaning in, a gentle smile on his face, his eyes locked on Chloe. And Chloe was looking up at him, her own smile relaxed and radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. The man's hand rested casually, possessively, on top of hers on the handle of her suitcase. The second photo, the hotel's lobby bar. They were sitting in a secluded booth by the window. Chloe had taken off her coat, revealing a form-fitting knit dress that accentuated every curve. She was leaning forward, listening intently as the man spoke. He was leaning in too, his arm draped casually along the back of the sofa, creating an intimate, enclosed space around them. His gaze was fixed on her face, filled with an undisguised mix of admiration and ownership. The third photo, an elevator lobby, just the two of them. The man was holding the door open for Chloe. As she walked in, he lifted his hand and, with practiced ease, rested it lightly on the small of her back. The gesture was quick and subtle, but it spoke volumes of familiarity and intimacy. Chloe didn't flinch. She even turned her head slightly and smiled at him. The fourth photo, a security camera still from an upper-floor hallway. Rick's methods were clearly effective. The man was swiping a key card to a room, holding the door open for Chloe. The moment before the door closed, the gentle smile on his face vanished, replaced by an expression of raw, undisguised hunger. Below the photos, Rick's report was brutally concise. Subject, Chloe Morgan. Location, the Azure Summit Hotel, Phoenix. Timeline, checked in yesterday afternoon, present. Associate, Julian Croft, male, 42, CEO of Apex Innovations. Married, one son, 8. Subject and Croft arrived together at 1528, checked into a single executive suite on the top floor. Room registered under Croft's name only. Dined at the Hotel Steakhouse from 18:30-20:00. Returned to the room together at 21:10. Have not left. Room service delivered breakfast for 2 this morning. Subject's cell signal has remained stationary in the suite since 21:15 last night. Croft's signal is co-located. Attached, background file on Croft and his company. The words were like lead weights, each one slamming into my chest, crushing the life out of me. Julian Croft, Apex Innovations. C. Married. A single suite. Breakfast for 2. Co-located cell signals. Every photo, every word, pointed to one undeniable, sickening truth. The cough, Chloe's panic, it all made a dirty, disgusting kind of sense now. I stared at the screen, at Julian Croft's smug, handsome face, at Chloe's beaming smile next to him, at his hand on her waist. A violent, world-ending rage erupted from the soles of my feet and shot straight to my head. My vision went black at the edges, my temples throbbed, and my hand on the mouse trembled so hard I could hear my knuckles cracking. Betrayal. On our 5th anniversary. While I was at home preparing a goddamn celebratory dinner, she was in a luxury suite with another man. Wrath. A guttural, animalistic roar tore from my throat, echoing in the empty apartment. I swept my arm across the table, sending a heavy crystal ashtray flying. It shattered against the opposite wall with a deafening crash, spewing glass and ash everywhere. A wave of nausea churned in my stomach. I stumbled to the bathroom and dry-heaved over the toilet, but nothing came up except the bitter taste of bile. I looked up, and the man in the mirror was a stranger. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was pale as a ghost, veins bulged on his forehead, and his mouth was twisted into a mask of pure agony and rage. This wasn't sadness. This was the volcanic fury of a man who had been stabbed in the back by the one person he trusted most in the world. I gripped the cold porcelain of the sink, gasping for air, staring at the terrifying, broken man in the mirror. A voice in my head screamed, tasting blood, Julian Croft. Chloe, you two are good. You're really, really good. Just you wait. Both of you, just you wait. A cold, hard wave of hatred washed over me, extinguishing the last embers of pain and weakness. I turned on the faucet and splashed freezing water on my face. When I looked up again, the reflection in the mirror was different. The eyes were still red, but the confusion and pain were gone. In their place was a calm, chilling emptiness as deep and dark as an abyss. The engine of revenge had just been ignited. The targets were clear, Julian Croft and Chloe Morgan. And the price? They were going to pay a price they couldn't even begin to imagine. The day Chloe came back, the sky over Denver was a leaden gray, spitting a cold, relentless drizzle. It matched my mood perfectly. She walked in dragging her suitcase, her face showing a hint of travel fatigue mixed with something else, a subtle, satisfied glow. When she saw me, she put on a bright, slightly placating smile. Honey, I'm home. God, I'm so exhausted, but that nightmare project is finally done. She dropped her bag and opened her arms for a hug. I didn't move. My body was rigid as stone. My eyes swept over her, cold and analytical. The new, expensive cashmere sweater she was wearing carried the faint, unfamiliar scent of a men's cologne. A cool, woodsy fragrance that wasn't mine. It pricked at my nerves like 1,000 tiny needles. Chloe's arms froze midair. Her smile faltered, and she lowered them awkwardly. What's wrong? Are you still mad? I told you I'd make it up to you. She tried to sound playful. Make it up to me? I pulled my lips back into a smile that had no warmth, my voice as dry as sandpaper. How? With some of the new tricks you learned in the executive suite at the Azure Summit. Boom. The color drained from Chloe's face, leaving it a ghostly white. She looked as if she'd been struck by lightning, her body swaying on her feet. Her eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated terror and disbelief. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. The apartment was dead silent, except for the drumming of the rain against the windows, a sound that seemed to echo the frantic beating of her heart. I walked slowly to the coffee table and picked up the beautifully wrapped gift box. The ribbon was still perfect. I untied it methodically, right in front of her. Inside, the six-figure limited edition watch rested on black velvet, its face reflecting the cold light from the ceiling. Happy 5th anniversary, Chloe, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm, like a judge reading a verdict. I picked up the watch, feeling the cold, heavy weight of the metal in my hand. Chloe finally found her voice, a desperate, choked sob. Ethan, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Explain. I cut her off, my eyes snapping up to meet hers, my gaze as sharp as a razor. Explain why you and Julian Croft, the CEO of Apex Innovations, checked into the same hotel suite. Explain why your cell phones were in the same room for over 12 hours. Explain how his hand ended up on your waist so damn comfortably. With every question, I took a step toward her. She backed away, terrified by my cold fury, until her back hit the console table in the entryway. She was trapped. She was shaking like a leaf in a storm, tears of shame and fear finally streaming down her face. She was incoherent, panic stealing her breath. You can't, can you? I stopped in front of her, looking down at the pathetic, weeping mess she'd become. I felt no pity, only a cold, satisfying surge of disgust. I held up the watch. This cost me half my yearly bonus. I thought it would look beautiful on you. My voice dropped, turning icy. Now I see it's not good enough for you. You deserve something much filthier. Before the last word left my mouth, I swung my arm back and hurled it. Crash! The priceless watch, which had once represented all my love and hope for our anniversary, smashed against the hard marble floor. The crystal face spiderwebbed into a million pieces, the delicate internal mechanisms and sapphire shards scattering across the room with a sickening crunch. A few pieces skittered to a stop at Chloe's feet. Chloe screamed, a raw sound of shock and terror. She covered her ears and crumpled to the floor, curling into a ball like a frightened animal, her body racked with suppressed, hopeless sobs. I stared down at the expensive wreckage on the floor, then at the trembling woman huddled by the wall. The destructive fire in my chest was strangely fed by her fear, burning hotter and colder all at once. Crying, I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Save it. Your tears are worth less than the garbage on the floor. I knelt, bringing my face close to her ear, and whispered in a voice only she could hear, a voice like a serpent's hiss, Julian Croft. Does his wife and kid know what kind of star employee he's keeping on the side? Chloe's head shot up. The last bit of color drained from her face, her sobs catching in her throat. Her eyes were wide with a new, deeper level of terror, as if she were staring into the abyss. I straightened up, turned my back on her, and walked toward my home office. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing off her cries and the last vestiges of the weak man I used to be. The office was dark. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the gray, rain-slicked city. My reflection was a faint outline against the glass, my eyes dark and predatory, like a wolf waiting to strike. Julian Croft, you're next. I'll start with the kingdom you're so proud of. Apex Innovations. Soon, it'll be your tomb. I picked up my phone. The screen's glow illuminated the cold, cruel smile spreading across my face. The gears of my revenge had begun to turn. Chapter 4. In the Phoenix tech scene, Julian Croft's Apex Innovations was a rising star. They specialized in AI-driven security systems, having gotten their start by landing a few key municipal contracts. Lately, they've been riding the smart city wave, and their growth was impressive. Croft himself was a regular feature in local business journals, playing the part of the visionary tech mogul, always talking about innovation, responsibility, and family. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The file Rick had provided was a treasure trove, exposing the rot beneath the company's polished exterior. Apex had expanded too quickly, and its cash flow was stretched dangerously thin. To maintain the illusion of success and keep the stock price inflated, Croft had engaged in some creative accounting. Several core projects had grossly exaggerated progress reports and misappropriated funds. Best of all, he bet the farm on securing a massive, high-profile smart district project with the city of Phoenix. He had poured nearly all the company's liquid capital into the initial phases and taken on complex loans guaranteed by a web of shell corporations. That project was his crown jewel, but it was also his Achilles heel. My attack would start there. I wasn't interested in small skirmishes. I was going to pull the rug out from under him and watch his entire empire crumble from the foundation up. Step 1. The Information War. I anonymously contacted several investigative financial blogs and influential Twitter accounts known for exposing corporate fraud. I didn't offer them money. I just provided a few highly specific, targeted keywords. Apex Innovations, Phoenix Smart District, cash flow issues, related party transactions, loan guarantee risks. These bloodhounds, smelling scandal would do the rest. Simultaneously, through an encrypted channel, I leaked carefully selected snippets of internal financial data, just enough to raise alarms without revealing my source, to a few of Croft's internal rivals and a competitor he had recently screwed over. Step 2. Pulling the plug. The main artery of funding for Croft's pet project was a local venture capital firm called Viridian Capital. The firm's head, a man named Marcus Thorne, was a sharp but notoriously superstitious old-school investor. I discovered he had a peculiar habit. Before any major deal, he consulted with a high-priced, incredibly discreet spiritual advisor in Sedona who catered exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. Rick's guy, after a generous donation to the advisor's foundation, arranged for a message to be delivered. A few days later, a rumor began to circulate in Thorne's inner circle. Apex Innovations was a bad bet. The project was energetically misaligned, and its leader, Croft, was operating under a cloud of dark personal karma that would inevitably poison the investment. In the world of high-stakes finance, a whisper of bad juju can be more lethal than a bad earnings report. Step 3. The kill shot. The time was right. Just as the financial blogs began publishing articles questioning Apex's solvency, competitors started raising concerns at industry panels, and Thorne became evasive. I deployed my trump card. A screenshot of a masterfully forged internal memo, using authentic templates and signature samples Rick had acquired, suddenly appeared in the inboxes of key investors and a few influential members of the Phoenix City Council. The memo indicated that due to unforeseen technical hurdles, Apex had internally flagged the Smart District project for significant risk of default and was already discussing an exit strategy to mitigate losses. It also hinted that Croft might be preparing to transfer assets offshore. Panic spread like a virus. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Marcus Thorne was the first to bolt. Citing fiduciary duty, he publicly announced that Viridian Capital was freezing all further investment in the project pending a full forensic audit. Spooked, 2 other investment firms immediately followed suit. The banks, smelling blood, began tightening Apex's credit lines and calling in outstanding loans. Apex Innovations' stock price went into a nosedive. For 3 consecutive days, it hit a circuit breaker at the opening bell, plunging into the red. Online investor forums were a firestorm of rage and panic. Croft was trapped. He was a caged animal, holding frantic press conferences, swearing the project was on track and the company was sound. He tried to use his connections to kill the negative press, but the enemies he'd made over the years were fanning the flames. He tried to call Thorne, but the old man wouldn't take his calls, relaying through his assistant only a cold, formal message. We will proceed as per the terms of the contract. The cash flow dried up completely. Suppliers started picketing the company headquarters. Payroll was missed. Key engineers were poached by competitors. The rot was now visible to everyone. In less than a month, the once arrogant Julian Croft was hit with a court-ordered asset freeze and a notice of personal liability. Apex Innovations, the kingdom he had built, officially filed for bankruptcy. His personal assets, the mansion, the sports cars, the stock portfolio, were seized. His bank accounts were wiped out. Worse, because he had personally guaranteed many of the corporate loans, the company's astronomical debt now fell squarely on his shoulders. He was personally on the hook for tens of millions of dollars, a hole so deep he would never climb out. I sat at my computer, looking at a news article. The headline photo showed a haggard, hollow-eyed Croft being swarmed by reporters outside the courthouse. Apex Innovations collapses. CEO Julian Croft faces personal bankruptcy. The title screamed. His once perfectly styled hair was a mess. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot with despair and disbelief. A cold, triumphant smile spread across my face. This is just the beginning, Julian. You're about to learn the taste of true ruin, one piece at a time. Chapter 5. The implosion of Julian Croft's business empire was just the first movement in my symphony of revenge. He had lost his money, his status, his prestige. He was a broken animal, but it wasn't enough. He had destroyed my home, defiled my marriage. He had to pay a more intimate, more humiliating price. The respectable family that served as his greatest alibi had to be shattered. Rick's work continued. A file on Croft's wife, Eleanor, soon landed in my inbox. She was the quintessential trophy wife, living a gilded life in a cage of her husband's making. In her early 40s and impeccably maintained, her entire world revolved around her son, who attended a ridiculously expensive private school and the delicate social ecosystem of her wealthy friends. Her greatest vulnerability was her son, and her desperate need to maintain the flawless facade of her perfect marriage within that circle. Destroying a fantasy built on sand requires precision. I chose a perfectly ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Eleanor had just left a charity luncheon and was having afternoon tea with a few other bored, wealthy wives at a chic cafe in the Cherry Creek shopping district. Their conversation, as always, orbited around jewelry, vacations, their children's achievements, and complaining about their successful, absentee husbands. At that moment, a courier in a plain uniform walked directly to her table carrying a thick, unmarked manila envelope. "Mrs. Eleanor Croft?" he asked, his voice just loud enough to be heard over the quiet chatter. Eleanor looked up, surprised. "Yes, what is it?" "A delivery for you, ma'am. Just need a signature." She signed quizzically. The courier left the envelope and walked away. The other women at the table watched with undisguised curiosity. "Who's sending you secret packages, Eleanor?" One of them asked with a laugh. Eleanor, a strange sense of unease creeping over her, tore open the envelope. A thick stack of high-gloss photographs slid out, scattering across the lace tablecloth. Time seemed to stop. The subject of every photo was her husband, Julian, and in every single one, he was with a beautiful younger woman. The intimate embrace outside the hotel, the deep, soulful gaze across the table at the bar, the hand resting possessively on her waist in the elevator. There were even a few shots of Julian swiping a key card while the woman, Chloe, smiled seductively as she walked into the hotel room. "Oh my God," one of the women gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and a flicker of malicious delight. The blood drained from Eleanor's face. Her hands trembled violently as she stared at the photos. She looked as if all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The sheer, crushing humiliation of it, especially in front of these women, her social rivals, was a tidal wave that drowned her. The perfect life she had so carefully curated was now shredded and exposed for all to see. This can't be," she whispered, her voice breaking as hot. Messy tears began to stream down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Eleanor, dear, don't get upset," one of them said with false sympathy, but their eyes were hungry, dissecting her pain. The whispers started, quiet and venomous. Is that Julian? He always seemed like such a family man. Who is that girl? She looks familiar. And at the Azure Summit, of all places, Eleanor couldn't take it anymore. She scrambled to gather the photos, shoving the scorching evidence into her designer handbag. She fled the cafe like a wounded animal, forgetting her coat, stumbling blindly into the street. Behind her, the whispers of her friends erupted into a full-blown, pitying dissection of her life. That was only the beginning. The same envelope was delivered to the front desk of her son's private school, addressed to her. Another was sent to the exclusive spa she frequented. Another to her parents' home. I made sure every corner of her sanitized world was contaminated by the ugly truth. The fallout was devastating. Eleanor had a complete breakdown. She called Julian, screaming, but he was a cornered rat, either ignoring her calls or yelling at her to leave him alone. She drove to the small, shabby apartment he was renting after their mansion was seized. There, she found not her charming, successful husband, but a broken man, unshaven, reeking of desperation, his eyes bloodshot with rage and failure. "Get out! Just get out of my life!" he had roared at her, shoving her so hard she fell. "I'm drowning. I don't have time for this." That moment was captured perfectly by Rick's associate with a long-lens camera. The photo was heartbreaking. Eleanor on the floor, weeping in despair, looking at the monster her husband had become. Those photos, along with the original set from the hotel, were posted anonymously on several popular local Denver forums and Reddit threads, with a juicy, clickable headline: "Fall from Grace. Bankrupt Apex CEO Julian Croft, millions in debt, exposed as cheater and abuser." The story went viral. Julian Croft's last shred of public dignity was annihilated. He was no longer a failed entrepreneur. He was a villain, a deadbeat, a monster. And Eleanor became the city's most pitiful punchline. A few days later, Rick sent me one last photo. It was taken outside the county courthouse. Eleanor, wearing dark sunglasses, held her son's hand tightly. Julian stood a few feet away, a hollowed-out shell of a man, watching blankly as his wife and child got into a taxi and drove out of his life forever. In his hand, he clutched a freshly issued divorce decree. His family was gone. Everyone had abandoned him. "Congratulations, Julian. Now you truly have nothing." I looked at the photo and took a long sip of ice water. The cold liquid slid down my throat, bringing with it a feeling of brutal, absolute clarity. Julian Croft was no longer an obstacle. He was just dust. "Now, Chloe, it's your turn, my dear wife." Chapter 6. Julian Croft was a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and bars. But the fire of my revenge was only half spent. Chloe, my loving wife, had to taste the same bitter dregs. Her betrayal was the deepest wound, and her punishment had to be the most absolute. I wanted her to feel the crushing weight of total public rejection. I chose the perfect stage for her downfall. Her parents were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary. Her mother, a proud, traditional woman who valued family reputation above all else, had been planning the party for a year. It was to be a grand affair at a downtown hotel ballroom, a testament to enduring love and family unity, with all their relatives and oldest friends in attendance. Chloe, desperate to repair her image after her prolonged business trip, had thrown herself into the planning, determined to play the role of the perfect, doting daughter. On the night of the party, the ballroom was filled with music and laughter. Chloe, in a stunning new dress, her face a mask of perfect composure, moved gracefully through the crowd, accepting compliments and making small talk. Her parents, seated at the head table, beamed with pride. And I, the dutiful son-in-law, was there too. I sat quietly at a table in the back, watching the charade unfold, a small USB drive heavy in my pocket. It was my anniversary gift. After the main course, as the champagne was poured for toasts, the lights dimmed. A large projector screen descended from the ceiling, ready for the sentimental photo slideshow Chloe had prepared. Her uncle was at the podium, ready to begin his speech. But the smiling family photos never appeared. The celebratory music cut out abruptly. The screen flickered to life, and a series of high-resolution images filled the massive screen, silencing the entire ballroom. The first photo, Julian Croft's hand resting on Chloe's at the entrance to the Azure Summit, the two of them sharing an intimate smile. The second, the two of them leaning close in the hotel bar, his eyes full of lust. The third, his hand, unmistakably, on the small of her back in the elevator. The fourth, the hotel room door, with Chloe smiling as she walked inside. And the final, devastating image, a split screen showing Julian's haggard, broken face from the news reports, next to the headline, Apexo, Julian Croft faces personal bankruptcy, millions in debt. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the clatter of a fork dropping onto a plate. Dozens of pairs of eyes, uncles, aunts, cousins, old family friends, swung from the screen to Chloe, their expressions shifting from celebration to shock, confusion, and finally, to cold, hard contempt. The champagne flute in Chloe's hand slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor. Red wine splattered across her expensive dress like blood. It's not me, she stammered, her voice a broken whisper, her body trembling uncontrollably. Smack! The sharp, ugly sound of a slap echoed through the silent room. Her mother, her face a mask of pure fury and shame, had struck her daughter across the face with all her strength. The blow sent Chloe stumbling backward into a chair. Mom, please let me explain. Chloe pleaded, clutching her cheek, tears and mascara streaming down her face. Don't you touch me, her mother shrieked, her voice raw with grief and humiliation. I don't have a daughter who would bring this kind of shame on our family. Get out of my sight. Chloe, how could you do this? Her father, a quiet, gentle man, was shaking with rage, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. How could you do this to Ethan, to us? The whispers started, sharp and cruel as shrapnel. I never trusted her. With a bankrupt crook, of all people. What a disgrace to the family. And poor Ethan, he's such a good man. Every word was a nail in her coffin. The faces of her family, once warm and loving, were now twisted with disgust. She was a pariah, a stain on their honor. Chloe completely broke. She covered her face and fled, stumbling out of the ballroom like a hunted animal, leaving a single high-heeled shoe behind on the polished floor. Her parents' perfect anniversary party had become the public execution of her reputation. But I wasn't done. The next morning, the same set of photos was attached to an anonymous email sent to the entire staff at Chloe's company, from the interns to the CEO. The subject line read, "A note regarding the personal conduct of your colleague, Chloe Morgan." The professional, competent, happily married image she had cultivated for years was instantly obliterated. She became the subject of hushed, mocking conversations in the break room and over Slack. Her boss called her in for a meeting and, in a cold, corporate tone, informed her that her personal choices reflected poorly on the firm and suggested it would be best for everyone if she resigned, effective immediately. In 3 days, Chloe went from a successful, respected professional to a social outcast, disowned by her family and fired from her job. Her world had completely collapsed, leaving her with nothing but darkness and the cold, crushing weight of her own choices. Chapter 7. Chloe was a ghost, haunting a cramped, run-down apartment in a forgotten corner of the city. The curtains were always drawn, a flimsy barrier against a world she no longer had the courage to face. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of old takeout containers and utter despair. She was a wreck, unwashed, eyes swollen from crying, a gaunt stranger in her own skin. My doorbell rang, the sound sharp and violent in the suffocating quiet. She jumped like a startled rabbit, her eyes wide with fear. Who could it be? A debt collector? Or him? The ringing persisted, patient and predatory. Finally, a sliver of desperate, pathetic hope made her drag herself to the door. She looked through the peephole, and her heart stopped. It was me. I stood there in a perfectly tailored dark suit, my hair immaculate, my expression unreadable. I held a thin file folder in one hand. I was the picture of success and control. She was the picture of ruin. Her hand trembled as she unlocked the door. Ethan, she whispered, her voice hoarse. She tried to smile, a grotesque twisting of her lips. I walked past her without a word, my eyes taking in the squalor of her new life. The trash on the table, the unmade bed. I finally let my gaze fall on her. There was no anger left, no hatred, just the cold indifference one feels when looking at something utterly worthless. "Don't call me that," I said, my voice like ice. "It disgusts me." Chloe flinched as if I'd struck her. Fresh tears welled in her eyes, and she did something I never expected. She dropped to her knees and grabbed my leg, her last desperate anchor in a stormy sea. "I'm sorry, Ethan, I swear, I know I was wrong. It was him, Julian, he manipulated me. Please forgive me for the 5 years we had. Please, I'll do anything. I'll be your slave. Just don't leave me. Please don't leave me." She sobbed hysterically, wiping her nose and tears on the fine wool of my trousers. I kicked my leg free with a single, sharp motion of disgust. She fell sideways onto the filthy floor. "Forgive you." I looked down at her, a cruel smirk touching my lips. "Chloe, you're not worthy of forgiveness." I tossed the file folder onto the floor in front of her. It landed with a soft slap. "What? What is this?" she whimpered, staring at it like it was a snake. "Divorce papers," I said, the words sharp and clean. "You sign them. You walk away with nothing. Everything you took from that apartment, including the clothes on your back, I'll consider a charitable donation. Sign, and we're done." "With nothing?" Her eyes widened in disbelief. "No, Ethan, you can't. The condo. We bought it together, and the savings." "We bought it." I laughed, a cold, empty sound. "My parents made the down payment. My salary paid the mortgage. The deed is in my name alone. As for the savings..." I leaned down, my face inches from hers, my voice a venomous whisper. "All those designer bags, the jewelry, the little gifts you bought for Julian. Where do you think that money came from? I have the bank statements, Chloe. Every single transaction. If we go to court, you'll be found guilty of adultery and misappropriation of marital assets. You won't get a dime. In fact, you might end up owing me money. Do you really want to roll those dice?" Every word was a hammer blow, shattering her last desperate hope. She crumpled, a boneless heap of despair on the floor. She knew I was right. She had nothing. "Sign it," I commanded. "Sign it, and you can crawl away with the last shred of your dignity. If you don't..." I paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "I have some wonderful photos of Julian living in a homeless shelter. I'm sure the internet would love to see them right next to a video of you, on your knees, begging me right here. A perfect ending to the story." "No, don't," she shrieked, the terror in her voice absolute. She scrambled for the papers, fumbling for a pen. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely write, but she scrawled her name on the signature line without even reading the document. When it was done, she collapsed, her body racked with silent, convulsive sobs. I picked up the signed agreement, checked the signature, then pulled a small digital recorder from my pocket and clicked it off. "Good," I said, putting the papers and the recorder away. "As of this moment, you and I are strangers. Get out of my city. Disappear. If I ever see you again." I let the threat trail off. The cold promise in my eyes was more than enough. I turned and walked out, closing the door on the sound of her animalistic wails. The hallway light felt bright and clean. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of freedom. The divorce papers in my briefcase felt as light as a feather, but they had lifted a mountain of filth from my soul. She thought walking away with nothing was the end, but her real punishment was just beginning. Chapter 8. Chloe had signed her life away, a broken shell of a woman hiding in shadows. But my masterpiece of revenge was not yet complete. Julian and Chloe, they started this together, and they would end it together, locked in a death spiral of their own making. I wanted them to be like two scorpions in a bottle, tearing each other apart until nothing was left. Julian was a ghost, chased by creditors, living off the grid. He had finally burrowed into his last refuge, a filthy, transient motel off the interstate, the kind of place where hope goes to die. It was a single room with peeling wallpaper, a stained mattress, and no window. It would be their final love nest. Through a few discreet channels, I made sure Julian learned of Chloe's new address and the fact that she might have some emergency cash stashed away. At the same time, I had a rumor reach Chloe that Julian, despite his fall, had a secret nest egg hidden away, his ticket to a comeback. For people drowning in despair, any piece of driftwood looks like a life raft. As I predicted, on a foul, rainy night, the door to Chloe's apartment was hammered on by a man soaked to the bone, reeking of cheap whiskey and desperation. It was Julian. "Chloe, open the damn door. It's me," he yelled, his voice a drunken rasp. Terrified, Chloe opened the door and recoiled. The man standing there was a monster. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his clothes stained and torn. The stench of booze and body odor hit her like a physical blow. "Julian, what are you?" She tried to slam the door, but he threw his shoulder against it and forced his way inside, kicking it shut behind him. His bloodshot eyes scanned the squalid room, then locked onto her. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip like iron. "The money, Chloe! Give me the money!" he snarled, his hot, foul breath in her face. "I know you have some left. Sell your jewelry. Anything. The loan sharks are going to kill me." "I don't have any money," she screamed, struggling against him. "Ethan took everything. I lost my job. There's nothing left. Liar." He slapped her hard across the face, the sound echoing in the small room. "You bitch. This is all your fault. If it wasn't for you, none of this would have happened. You ruined my life." He poured all his rage, all his failure, into his fists. "You hit me." The last of her restraint shattered. She flew at him, nails raking across his face. "You pathetic bastard. You're the one who lied to me. You're the failure, a weak, useless old man. I'll kill you," he roared, grabbing her by the hair and throwing her to the floor. The tiny apartment became a cage for a death match. The two former lovers, who had once whispered promises in a luxury suite, were now two rabid animals tearing each other apart on a dirty floor. Her screams, his curses, the sickening thud of fists on flesh, and the sound of breaking furniture filled the night. "Give me the money. Go to hell, you old bastard. I'll strangle you, you whore. Help me. He's killing me." From an unmarked van parked down the street, my operative recorded it all, the high-fidelity microphone capturing every brutal, ugly sound of their love affair's final, violent chapter. The fight ended when Julian, having found the few $100s Chloe had hidden in a drawer, staggered out into the night, leaving her bruised and sobbing in the wreckage of her room. The next day, a heavily edited audio clip was anonymously uploaded to a popular true crime podcast and several local gossip forums. The title was irresistible. "Exclusive audio. Bankrupt CEO and his mistress in vicious brawl over cash from penthouse to hell." The clip was a sensation. The raw, animalistic hatred in their voices, the sounds of the struggle. It was the ugliest, most compelling kind of train wreck. Julian and Chloe were no longer just a scandal. They were a legend, the city's most despised cautionary tale. They were vermin, forever nailed to a public pillar of shame. Listening to the recording, to the sounds of them destroying each other, I leaned back in the leather seat of my office and lit a cigar. A cold, pure, and intensely satisfying pleasure washed over me. Vermin belong in the gutter. Let them tear each other apart. It's the only ending they deserve. Chapter 9. The dust settled. After robbing Chloe, Julian Croft vanished completely. The rumors were grim. He was on the run from loan sharks, in jail for another petty crime, or maybe he was the nameless man seen fighting with stray dogs over scraps behind a dumpster. Whatever his fate, it was an anonymous, squalid end. And Chloe, after the attack, she disappeared too, kicked out of her apartment. With nowhere to go, she likely fled to another city, another life at the bottom, forever haunted by what she had done and what had been done to her. Her life, for all intents and purposes, was over. And me, Ethan Vance. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new penthouse apartment, looking down at the glittering expanse of the city below. The air was scented with expensive cologne, not the faint, lingering perfume of betrayal. My new life was sleek, minimalist, and empty of anyone but myself. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. A 7-figure dividend from one of my new investment ventures had just been deposited. The long string of zeros glowed on the screen. I picked up a crystal tumbler filled with a fine single malt scotch. The ice clinked musically against the glass. I took a sip, the fiery liquid burning a clean path down my throat, leaving a smooth, satisfying warmth behind. Pure satisfaction. It was a feeling that saturated every cell in my body. Not emptiness, not regret. It was the exhilarating, crystal-clear thrill of a man who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side, standing on the ashes of his enemies. I thought of Julian's hollow eyes outside the courthouse. I thought of Chloe's broken sobs as her family turned their backs on her. I thought of the sounds of them tearing each other apart like animals in that filthy room. Every memory was a shot of the finest liquor, warming my blood, making me feel alive. They had dealt me a mortal wound, and I had repaid them by burning their entire world to the ground. I had systematically stripped them of their money, their status, their families, their reputations, and finally, their humanity. Watching them self-destruct in the abyss I had crafted for them. That feeling was better than any fortune. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. The man looking back was sharp, tailored, his eyes cold and clear, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. The wounded man he had replaced was gone forever, burned away in the fires of revenge. What was left was stronger, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. I raised my glass to the man in the reflection and to the city sprawling at my feet. To new beginnings, I murmured, my voice steady and sure. I drained the glass in one long swallow. The fire in my throat spread through my veins. The future was a blank slate, an open road. There were no shadows of betrayal, no ghosts of a failed marriage. There was only the empire I was building, stone by cold stone. As for Julian and Chloe, they were less than memories. They were nothing. I picked up the keys to my new sports car from the marble countertop. Tonight, I would drive up to the mountains, feel the roar of the engine, and look down on this city that was now finally mine. The revenge was over, but the man it had created was just getting started, and it felt damn good.